Why are we involving ourselves in a country on Russia's doorstep? That makes no sense at all. The best that we can do is try to alleviate the suffering. You know, Ukraine is a big graveyard. That's all it is. That's a dead country now. Just within the last 48 hours, the Russians have surrendered a total of 10,000 Ukrainian troops. I think 5,000 in one area, 5,000 in another. And the Russians sent a message to them: surrender or you will be annihilated. And Zelensky ordered them to fight. They haven't got a snowball's chance in hell. Ukrainian military is decimated. Most of our technology did not perform to expectation. We wasted lives. The great men of NATO, the leading generals who gave all the wonderful advice, primarily American and British, to execute a series of offensives that bled Ukraine white. Ukraine is finished militarily. What he's pointing out is the reality everyone keeps dodging. We involved ourselves in a war sitting on Russia's doorstep, then acted surprised when it collapsed under its own weight. 10,000 troops surrendering isn't a tactic. It's a sign of a military that's done. Western generals promised breakthroughs, but their plans only drained Ukraine dry. The truth is simple. Ukraine is finished militarily, and pretending otherwise is just extending the suffering. And right now, I think we have probably a drama queen republic, if we can keep it. Everything is theater. It's unending. And President Trump seems to love this sort of thing. But the theater is confusing. It sends people in the wrong directions. This is especially true in Moscow. You know, the Russians are very serious people. They take what's happening on their borders very seriously. That's why we have a war. So they don't understand Trump, he suddenly expresses a willingness to meet. But then his sort of staff backtracks and says, well, we've got to go back to a ceasefire. When he realized there would be no ceasefire until we had some sort of agreement hammered out. What he's really saying is that Washington has turned foreign policy into performance art, and Trump leans into that chaos. But the problem is simple. Theater might work in American politics. It doesn't work on the world stage. Especially not with Russia. They're literal, serious, and expect consistency. So when Trump signals he wants talks, and his own team immediately walks it back, it looks like confusion, not strategy. And in geopolitics, mixed signals aren't harmless. They're how wars start and how peace slips away. So he calls up and says, "I'm not coming." Well, the Russians interpret that as potentially threatening. He then imposes more sanctions. Again, more threats. Although these sanctions frankly don't amount to a tinker's dam. But having said that, simultaneously, he's withdrawing U.S. forces from Romania and Bulgaria. And I expect he'll withdraw the forces in Poland and probably Lithuania and elsewhere. Why? Because we're not postured to fight the Russians. No one in the United States has any interest in a war with Russia. I think we have a lot of saber rattling at the moment in Eastern Europe. That will probably continue. But if you're a Russian, you're trying to figure out what does this man want? He's pulling forces out, but he still threatens. He says he wants an agreement, But he goes back to this ceasefire, and when we say no for the 99th time until we have an agreement, he imposes more sanctions. So this is a huge problem. You're asking the right question, but there's no easy answer because we have no coherent national security strategy. From Russia's view, this looks completely erratic. Threats one moment, troop withdrawals the next. It's not strategy, it's confusion. And when a superpower sends mixed signals, it becomes dangerous fast. The real issue is simple. America has no clear plan, and everyone else can see it. None. Everything is impulse-driven. So when you turn to the Middle East, what's the policy? Well, the policy is that we're going to do whatever Israel wants us to do. That's no mystery. You know, it's very interesting to me that this woman Moshado, who's been named as the possible successor to Maduro if we succeed with regime change in Venezuela, she's the new Nobel Peace Prize winner. She immediately says, if I'm the president, if I take over, we will move our embassy to Jerusalem. This is the problem with impulse-based foreign policy. It bleeds into every region. In the Middle East, there's no real strategy, just automatic alignment with whatever Israel wants. And when even a potential leader in Venezuela signals loyalty to Washington by promising to move her embassy to Jerusalem, it shows how warped the incentives have become. It's not diplomacy, it's political signaling dressed up as policy. Well, why would somebody in Venezuela give a damn where the embassy was, in Israel? I think she knows where the power lies. I think she understands the audience that she's playing to. So that kind of informs us as to where we're likely to go in the Middle East. And when we say likely to go, it's wherever Israel wants us to go. And I think the Emirates understand that. I think Qatar understands it. I know Kuwait does. I think Saudi Arabia understands it. Doesn't mean they like it, but they know it. And talking about Venezuela's situation, I mean a aircraft carrier there, that's a pretty big show of force. Does it worry you what's going on down there right now? Well, it does, but perhaps not for the reasons that the administration would say. You know, we've been listening to this drug war rhetoric now for a very long time. It's becoming increasingly difficult for many of us to take it seriously. When you have an organization like the CIA that is well known for its involvement in drug trafficking. When you talk about the border, yes, the appearances are better, the optics are better, but illegal human and drug trafficking continues. In fact, a lot of it goes right through the legal ports of entry because the drug cartels are paying the customs officers to turn blind eye to their material. So, they're informed in advance that a truck's coming through, going to someplace. Let it through. Don't obstruct. And they get an extra $30,000 every month on top of their existing pay. He's basically saying, this isn't real strategy, it's power signaling. A Venezuelan leader talking about Jerusalem isn't about Israel, it's about pleasing Washington. And the same pattern shows up in the drug war narrative. We posture with carriers and tough talk, but everyone knows corruption lets cartels move product straight through legal ports. It's all optics, not policy. We have a great deal of difficulty dealing with that. That's why I have recommended a long time ago to the president, we need to put the military on the border and put it under military control, and then rotate battalions on and off until the place is secure, because you can't compete with the flood of money that cultivates corruption. That's a huge problem. It's a hug problem inside the United States. So right now, the drug cartels can continue to do a lot of damage to us, regardless of what we do to Venezuela. I'll be frank, all they need at the moment is a van with a map of the interstate highway to deliver their human or drug packages wherever they are sending them for money. That's the problem. I don't think this is going to solve that. But what it will do, and this is something I'm very concerned about, is it will once again remind the Latin American republics and peoples down there of just how threatening we are, because we have a long track record of intervention down there. Whether it's El Salvador or Nicaragua, you name it, we've been in and out of these places. And I'm already hearing people say, well, this will be like Panama, just like Noriega. His point is blunt. The real threat isn't Venezuela. It's the cartel pipeline flowing straight through our own border. And no amount of foreign intervention fixes that. Sending carriers south only reinforces the old image of America meddling in Latin America, something those countries haven't forgotten. Meanwhile, cartels don't need warships to beat us. Just van, a highway, and a corrupt checkpoint. Well, Noriega was removed. I don't think that ended drug trafficking permanently. I don't see any evidence for that. Has it suppressed it? I'm sure somewhat, but there are always other ways to engage in this criminality. So the idea should be, you stop it at the border, and you stop it in your coastal waters. If you can't do that, then you have to enforce law inside the United States, and you're not going to get very far unless you are harsh. And the man who demonstrated just how effective this is was Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore. If you come into Singapore and you are peddling drugs, you will face the death penalty. Sure, you'll go to trial. You'll have a jury trial, but that's what you're facing if you do this. And Mao used to say all the time to his party members, shoot one, educate a million. You never have to execute very many people to get the point across. It comes across pretty quick. But inside the United States, you people say, well, that's not humane. Well, how humane is it for hundreds of thousands of Americans to die of fentanyl? Somehow or another, you don't want to find the individuals who are responsible for distributing it and punishing them, even if it involves capital punishment. If you're trying to save them, that's what you have to do. What he's really saying is that removing foreign leaders never stops the drug flow. It just shifts the routes. The real fight is at the border and inside the country. And if you can't control those, foreign interventions won't matter. His comparison to Singapore makes the point harsh penalties create deterrence. In the US, we call that inhumane. But letting fentanyl kill hundreds of thousands is somehow acceptable. It's a hard argument, but it forces a simple question. If you want to save lives, how far are you willing to go? Coastline, 1,379 miles it shares with Brazil. 1,380 miles it shares with Colombia. And we already know there are paramilitary organizations in Colombia. As many as 100,000, and also in Brazil, who are just anxious as hell to go into Venezuela and fight the Yankees. What are we accomplishing? Macgregor's point is clear. Invading or bombing countries in Latin America would backfire instantly. Venezuela is massive, surrounded by armed groups ready to resist, and the region still remembers past U.S. interventions. Any military move there wouldn't solve a problem. It would start a regional war. We don't need. And remember that just a few weeks ago, in fact, just last week, President Trump admitted in the Oval Office in an interview that Maduro had approached him and offered him a stake in the oil and gas industries. In fact, President Trump said he's offered everything. And the question was, well, is that not enough? No, that's not enough. What? How often has regime change worked? How often has it benefited us? I think the answer is not much. It's very expensive. If we go into Venezuela, we remove the government, try to install a new one. There are people who will support it, but there are a lot of people who will fight it. So what are we cultivating? A civil war. And then, do we make Venezuela dependent upon us? What a disaster. You know, how many trillions have we lost in the Middle East? What did it cost us in Vietnam? We went off the gold standard in 1977-72. Why? Because we were broke. Macgregor's point is simple. Even with Maduro offering oil access, Washington still wants regime change, a strategy that rarely works and usually ends in civil war. We've already wasted trillions on failed interventions. Doing it again in Venezuela would just repeat the same expensive mistake. So, you know, this doesn't make any sense. In Washington, who aren't even qualified to run a Burger King. And at the same time, what are they doing? They're advising on national brain surgery. This is ridiculous. We don't have a group of professionals, people that really understand anything rooted in foreign policy, rooted in all the various areas of policy that are important to the American people. In the meantime, 70% of American families live paycheck to paycheck. How can this go on? This can't. Colonel, does classifying the cartels as terrorist organizations, does that accomplish anything? You know, that's a good question. Legally, I suppose in some ways it does. I'm someone who always felt strongly, if we were serious about this, we would effectively declare war on the cartels. But that war should be fought on our borders and inside our country, not overseas. And see, my concern is this is another exercise in diverting everybody's attention into something that's going to cost a lot of. It's going to be damaging to us. And while at the same time at home, what are we doing? Yeah, nothing. You You know, as long as you have the cost of groceries rising and high inflation, as long as you continue to print money without restraint, Macgregor's point here is blunt. Washington is full of people, unqualified for the jobs they're making life and death decisions about. While Americans struggle paycheck to paycheck, the same clueless voices keep pushing dramatic, expensive ideas that solve nothing. Labeling cartels as terrorists sounds tough, but he sees it as another distraction. Overseas commitments and focus on the military over the next 10 years, with a strategy that is designed to adapt us to a new world. A new world, new technology, new societies. You know, if you'll exercise that restraint, you'll have a lot of capability in 10 years that'll put you far ahead of everyone else. We won't do it. We're always back in there, using what we have, over and over and over again. And you've got families inside the military that are on food stamps. You know, they can't feed themselves. They're not paid enough. And everybody says, well, the military's paid too much. Well, we have to look at where the distribution of funds goes in the military. And it doesn't go to the families of servicemen at the lowest level that have to man the ships, that man the equipment, that continuously deploy. So, we got a lot of problems, but no one really wants to address them. Macgregor's point is straightforward. Constant foreign adventures make real, long-term planning impossible. If America stepped back, showed restraint, and rebuilt for the next decade, it could regain serious strength. But instead, we burn through the same equipment, the same troops, and the same budgets over and over. Meanwhile, military families are literally on food stamps, while billions vanish into bureaucracy. The problem isn't that we spend too little. It's that we spend on everything except what actually matters. We have a problem right now because President Trump, whether he likes it or not, is a lightning rod for many, many issues, even things for which he's absolutely not responsible. So he's an easy person to point to, mobilized discontent and hatred. And remember, you've got a lot of people out there. Soros is one of many, but people out there who are willing to fund Antifa or fund anybody who is over that in 1861, and it was brutal. We settled it. If you're not going to enforce federal law, you have a choice. You can change it, or you can impose it. Now, Trump wants to impose it. I happen to agree with him. Macgregor's point here is that Trump has become a symbol by some, hated by others, and that makes him the easiest target to rally anger around, even for things he didn't cause. And when groups are being openly funded to resist federal authority, it tests whether a country can even function. His message is simple. If federal law isn't enforced, you either change it or you collapse. And on that, he sides with Trump's instinct to enforce it. We're moving into a different world now, where you're going to end up with a divergence between the United States and Europe and the rest of the world, simply because BRICS is growing and building a parallel financial system, right? Along with parallel institutions. Now, we all said, just here in the United States, because I sat around and listened to people in the government say it. Well, this is true, but they'll never get there very fast. You know, we'll be king of everything for at least 2 more decades, maybe more. They can't threaten the dollar. Blah, blah, blah. Everyone is now saying, wow, look how far they have come. Now, the Japanese, or excuse me, the Chinese, will tell you flat out, our banking system is not nearly as sophisticated as yours. So it's going to take a lot longer to get there, and they admit that. But it's clear they're working on it, and they're doing very well. They have the equivalent of the SWIFT system that is actually easier to use and easier to exploit for cross-border purchases and transfers than our own SWIFT system. So we're moving into this new world, and gold is at the center of it. For the rest of the world, have no idea. But I do know that for the rest of the world, they're moving increasingly in this direction of gold. So we have to take that into consideration. This is not, I have a bigger army than you do. This is not, I have a bigger air force than you do. And this is the final point. We don't seem to understand that economic prosperity and strength are the foundation for military power. Macgregor's warning here is simple. The world is shifting, and BRICS is building a parallel financial system faster than Washington ever expected. The dollar's dominance is no longer guaranteed, and countries are quietly moving toward gold-backed stability, while the U.S. keeps relying on military power instead of economic strength. But in the modern world, armies don't decide influence, economies do. And that's the part America still isn't grasping, and we're losing on the economic prosperity and production and strength side of the equation right now. We don't understand that that's what made us so powerful during and after World War II. You know, our greatest period of expansion as a scientific industrial power came between 1920 and 1970. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because we had almost no immigration. We shut it down. We had something called the Exceptional Skills Act that was designed to bring people in who were exceptional, who could immediately assimilate and make important contributions. By the way, that's how Einstein came into the United States. But otherwise, we shut it down. We assimilated the people that were there, and all of the inventions that had been devised in the previous century and the first part of the 20th century were assimilated. So suddenly, electricity, you know, central heating. I mean, we go down the list. It's endless. Nylon, take your pick. You know, we went from a world where most people grew up on a farm with indoor plumbing. Our whole standard of living skyrocketed. And the building of the manufacturing process that just expanded overnight during World War II was then rapidly transformed into commercial use. We deliberately did that because we didn't want, as Eisenhower put it, the large military-industrial complex. That's why he warned against it, and he was instrumental in keeping military spending down and working to find ways to get along at the time with the Soviet Union. Now today, nobody mentions that anymore, but Eisenhower understood what war really meant. It meant that it disrupted your entire society and your economy. And though we were able to benefit from it, fortunately, he knew that would not necessarily be the truth in the future, and that at some point we could become a target if we were stupid. And we've been very stupid since 1965. And I think right now, we're in a very dangerous place. Macgregor's warning here is simple. The world is shifting, and BRICS is building a parallel financial system faster than Washington ever expected. The dollar's dominance is no longer guaranteed, and countries are quietly moving toward gold-backed stability, while the U.S. keeps relying on military power instead of economic strength. But in the modern world, armies don't decide influence, economies do. And that's the part America still isn't grasping.